History often tells us the story of ancient Israel is one of a people scattered and lost to time. But what if they weren't lost? What if they were just hidden? This is the story of an unwritten chapter, a theory that Israelite tribes, fleeing the collapse of their kingdoms, journeyed deep into the heart of Africa. Not to disappear, but to be reborn. The official histories talk about conquests and dispersions, about the 10 tribes swallowed by Assyria and the tribe of Judah crushed by Rome. We're told they just assimilated, their bloodlines diluted into the great sea of nations. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the prophets themselves left a trail, pointing to a continental cradle where their descendants would wait? This is a journey into a past some believe has been obscured, a truth living not in official monuments, but in the blood, song, and spirit of a people. For centuries, one question has echoed through history. Where are the lost tribes of Israel? The trail seems to go cold in the dust of ancient Mesopotamia, but what if we've been looking at the wrong map? What if the answer isn't to the east, but to the south? What if one of the greatest migrations in history wasn't an aimless wandering, but a journey into the heart of Africa? A journey whose echoes are still felt today in rituals, languages, and in the DNA of peoples who have long felt a connection they couldn't quite explain. The story we all know ends in fire and chains. In the 8th century BC, the Assyrian Empire crushes the northern kingdom of Israel, deports the 10 tribes, and seemingly erases them. Centuries later, in 70 AD, Roman legions sack Jerusalem, burn the Second Temple, and drag the survivors of Judah away. History tends to mark this as an end, but for proponents of this theory, it's just the beginning. They argue the prophets didn't speak of annihilation, but of a scattering. And some believe they gave us coordinates. Deuteronomy 28 lays out blessings and curses, speaking of a people who would be scattered among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. That's the diaspora we know, but other prophets got more specific. Zephaniah 3:10 declares, "From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering." Now let's pause and think about the ancient world's geography. Ethiopia, or Cush in Hebrew, wasn't the country we know today. It was a term for the vast lands south of Egypt, much of sub-Saharan Africa. The rivers of Ethiopia would have meant the Nile and its tributaries, the very arteries of the continent. The prophet Isaiah might have echoed this in chapter 11, stating God would recover the remnant of his people from Cush. Proponents of this theory argue that the prophets were pointing south, beyond the known world, to Africa as a place of refuge. They believe they were drawing a map for those who had eyes to see, telling us the journey didn't end in chains. It continued on foot, a great exodus southward. A prophecy needs a push. This scattering didn't happen in a vacuum. It was driven by the brutal gears of history. Some alternative historical interpretations propose a stunning theory, that the great migrations that shaped Africa were connected to these biblical exiles. This theory, it's important to note, is controversial and not accepted by mainstream historians, who see the Bantu migrations as an indigenous African movement. Still, the theory posits that the first wave lines up with the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel around the 8th century BC. As Assyrians swept through, it suggested that large groups of Israelites fled, not into captivity, but away from it, journeying into West Africa. This timeline, they argue, overlaps with the first major wave of what we call the Bantu migration. A second, more documented wave is theorized to have occurred after the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. As Jerusalem burned, historians like Josephus recorded a massive flight of refugees. While many were taken to Rome, countless others fled south into Egypt, and from there followed ancient pathways deeper into the continent. This, the theory suggests, aligns with a second major wave of migration. They weren't aimless wanderers, they were survivors, carrying what was left of their culture and covenant, looking for a place to live in peace. And there are hints of this in some ancient texts. The Timbuktu Chronicles, like the 17th century Tariq al-Sudan, mention communities in West Africa that some historians link to a Jewish or Israelite presence. One record speaks of a community in Tindirma called the Bani Israel, or Children of Israel. While limited, these records are seen by some as documenting a vibrant Israelite presence long before European colonization. History in books can be burned. History in stone can be broken. But history written into the soul of a people? That's harder to erase. Perhaps the most compelling case for this Israelite journey isn't in archives, but in the living cultures of Africa today. Across the continent, numerous groups hold oral traditions that claim an Israelite heritage. Take the Igbo people of Nigeria. For centuries, their elders have passed down the story that they descend from the tribe of Gad. This oral history is bolstered by cultural practices that show striking parallels to ancient Hebrew customs. The Igbo traditionally practice circumcision on the 8th day, a direct echo of the covenant with Abraham. Their dietary laws and purification rituals also reflect practices found in the Torah. While mainstream genetic studies haven't established a direct link, the cultural similarities are powerful. They aren't alone. The Yoruba people of Nigeria have a group known as the Bani Ephraim, or Children of Ephraim. In Sierra Leone, the Limba people's oral history speaks of migrating from the east. But the Lemba people of southern Africa have perhaps the most famous claim. Their tradition speaks of an exodus from Judea. For decades, this was seen as folklore. Then, in the 1990s, genetic testing revealed something fascinating. A significant percentage of Lemba men carry a Y chromosome haplotype, known as the Cohen modal haplotype, a genetic signature common among the Jewish priestly class, the Kohanim. Science was finally catching up to oral tradition, providing a tangible link that amazed researchers. These cultural echoes are viewed by many as the footprints of a people who carried their identity across a continent, preserving it in ceremony and song. While many of these connections are debated, there is one community whose Israelite heritage is officially recognized by the State of Israel, the Beta Israel of Ethiopia. For what may be 2 millennia, a thriving Jewish community existed in the Ethiopian highlands, totally isolated from the rest of the Jewish world. They called themselves Beta Israel, the House of Israel, and they lived by the laws of the Torah, which they kept in the ancient Ge'ez language. Their history is one of incredible perseverance against immense pressure. Their form of Judaism, Haymanot, is based on the written Torah, as their isolation meant they never adopted the later rabbinic traditions of the Talmud. Their own traditions often trace their lineage back to Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. While historians debate their precise origins, their identity has never been in doubt. The turning point came in the 1970s, when Israeli religious authorities officially recognized the Beta Israel as descendants of ancient Israelites, making them eligible to immigrate under Israel's law of return. This led to dramatic airlifts in the 80s and 90s, Operation Moses and Operation Solomon, where tens of thousands of Ethiopian Jews were brought to Israel, a modern exodus fulfilling a centuries-old dream. The story of the Beta Israel is the undeniable anchor in this narrative. It provides concrete proof that a remnant of Israel did survive and flourish for thousands of years in Africa. It transforms the question from, if this could happen, to how many others might there be? This story doesn't end in the past. It's exploding into a global movement of people seeking to reclaim a lost identity. And the most visible example is the community of the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem. Their story starts not in Africa, but in 1960s Chicago. A former steelworker named Ben Carter had a vision that African Americans were the descendants of the ancient Israelites, and it was time to return to the Promised Land. Adopting the name Ben Ami Ben Israel, he gathered a following of African Americans who were convinced of their Hebrew roots. They saw the transatlantic slave trade as the horrific fulfillment of the curses in Deuteronomy 28, the prophecy of being taken to a strange land on ships. In 1967, a few hundred followers began their own exodus, first to Liberia to purge themselves of the trauma of their captivity before moving on to Israel. Their path wasn't easy. Unlike the Beta Israel, their claims were not based on a continuous, documented history, and they were not recognized by the Israeli government, leading to decades of struggle over their legal status. Despite it all, they built a thriving community, mainly in the desert town of Dimona. They live a highly disciplined life based on the Torah, adopting Hebrew names and adhering to a strict vegan diet. They call themselves Hebrew Israelites, not Jews, connecting to all 12 tribes. Today, many have received permanent residency, and their children serve in the Israeli military. The African Hebrew Israelites represent the climax of this story, not just remembering a history, but actively living out what they believe is its prophetic conclusion. This journey challenges so much of what we think we know about history and identity. If this story awakens something in your spirit, if it makes you ask deeper questions about where we all come from, then share this video. The forgotten chapters of our past can only be restored when we have the courage to talk about them. Subscribe for more hidden histories and let me know in the comments what part of this journey resonates most with you. The story of the Israelites' journey into Africa isn't a simple tale of being lost and found. It's a profound saga of preservation and identity. The evidence isn't in one place. It's woven into the fabric of a continent. It's in the prophetic scriptures that some believe pointed south. It's in the historical theories about ancient migrations. It's in the living traditions of the Igbo, the Lemba, and others. It is anchored by the recognized history of the Beta Israel of Ethiopia. And it culminates in the modern awakening of communities like the African Hebrew Israelites, who are turning this hidden history into a living future. The children of Israel weren't simply lost. They were scattered. And some believe that in that scattering, they planted ancient roots deep in the soil of Africa, waiting for a season of remembrance. Perhaps that season is now. This story isn't the end of the book, but the opening of a chapter that was never meant to be sealed. The unwritten chapter is still being written, and its final verses are for this generation to discover and reclaim.